Everyone, hello. Hope you guys had a good morning session. At least for the students, I hope you guys enjoyed a good day off of school, and at least to come to these conferences. That's great. Before we begin, at this time, if you guys haven't opened any chips or haven't unwrapped your sandwiches, now would probably be the best time to do it. Exactly, yes. Already do it. Just pop them open, save the embarrassment for later. Alrighty, well, it's my pleasure to host the panel for our keynote portion today. We'll be looking into leadership in action, and with us are two distinctive leaders. We have Mayor Lyrian Gaylor-Baird and Mayor Travis Stovall, both from Lincoln, Nebraska, and from Gresham, Oregon. Is that right? There we go. All right, Gresham, there we go. So Mayor Gaylor-Baird, now serving her second term, has a background in city budget analysis, management consulting, and community leadership, including her work with the Boys and Girls Club. She is also a recipient of the Aspen Institute's Rodell Fellowship in Public Leadership. And Mayor Stovall, in addition to leading Gresham, is the founder of eRep Inc. It's a company dedicated for workforce engagement and with experience in healthcare administration, finance, economic development, and so forth. He is committed to fostering business growth and community well-being. Today, they'll share their insights on leadership, decision-making, and generating a good, well-rounded community in which they're in. So please join me in welcoming both of our mayors. Thank you so much. Thank you. Isn't this so cool? This is great. All right. Well, thank you guys again for coming. I know you guys have a very packed schedule and, lots of sleeping to do afterwards. But no, we appreciate you guys, and we want to hear more about your guys' story and how you guys got to where you are now. So, to start off with just a very simple question. Where did you grow up and what was your childhood like? If there's any.
Where did I grow up with? All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah. Well, I'm a Union College graduate, so
Oh yeah.
enjoy coming back home. And there's something that I've got to share straight away before I jump into kind of where I grew up, where I got started, is the fact that your amazing mayor here in Lincoln, Nebraska, is from, of all places, Gresham, Oregon. So got her start there in Gresham, and now is leading the great city of Lincoln, Nebraska, and you've got a phenomenal mayor here. As a matter of fact, she runs U.S. Conference of Mayors. She actually chairs our Mayors of Universities committee. So just really well connected with our students and our education and all of those great things. And of course, as you all know, the designer of the Lincoln flag, Lincoln City flag, is a former alumni of Union Adventist University also. A lot of connections. So with that, where am I from? Kansas City, Kansas.
There you go.
Anybody from Kansas? Anybody from Kansas? That's it? Where are the rest of you from? Gresham. Really? You're from Gresham? What's just outside Gresham, like Portland? Oh yeah, see that's the ongoing joke. People ask me where's Gresham. I'm like, Portland's our suburb. I don't even call it the Greater Portland metropolitan area. I call it the Greater Gresham metropolitan area, by the way. So born and raised in Kansas City, Kansas. Actually, I really enjoy Kansas. It's way too hot and way too cold. I got to the Pacific Northwest because of the movie Sleepless in Seattle. I was just telling your mayor the story. So yes, Sleepless in Seattle got me to the Pacific Northwest because Tom Hanks' character actually lives in a floating house. I've never seen a floating house before that time frame. And before I got there, I actually saw the movie Free Willy 2. Yes, Free Willy 2 specifically because they had a shot of Friday Harbor in the movie. Does anybody know where Friday Harbor is? Gresham, do you? You're shaking your head. Yes, Friday Harbor's in the Puget Sound, and beautiful San Juan Islands. And so I got the chance to go to Seattle. I was assistant dean at Auburn Adventist Academy. Anybody from Auburn? All right. So I was at Auburn Adventist Academy for a year. Got the chance to go to the Northwest and love the Northwest. You talk about the power of positive thinking. I now live in a floating house and have a house in the San Juan Islands. There you go. The only sad thing about my year at Auburn Adventist Academy is I never ran into Meg Ryan. Super sad. So I went to Enterprise Academy. I know I won't ask any of you from Enterprise because you're way too young because Enterprise doesn't exist anymore. But I went to Enterprise Academy and ended up here at Union Adventist University back in the 90s and got a degree in finance primarily, but also accounting. And so from there, I went to Adventist Health. They're in the Portland metropolitan area. And today, as we've already referenced, I get the opportunity to lead the city of Gresham, Oregon, the fourth largest city in the state. I would say it's the 250th fourth largest city in the country, but who's bragging? It wouldn't be me. So with that, thank you again. Thank you for having me here. Looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Is this working? All right. Well, thank you, Mayor Stovall, not only for sharing some of your story, and clearly, isn't he a visionary? He's made his own personal vision come true. You can see why he has become the mayor of his community. He's helping make the vision of his town of Gresham come true. I was so delighted to know that you're coming back, and while I have been to Union and College Adventist University. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say it yet, but I've been here recently. But because of your invitation, I was even more excited to be on campus yet again. And as you heard, I grew up in Oregon, and love is what brought me to Lincoln, Nebraska. My husband was born here. He grew up in Superior, Nebraska, a small town on the Nebraska-Kansas border. But when we had our first child, we decided to move back to Lincoln to be near family and have a great quality of life. At the time, we're living in the Bay Area where our commute to work could either be 20 minutes or 2 hours and 20 minutes, just depending on traffic. You know, it's a very densely populated area, really expensive. We had great career opportunities, but we made a choice to come back to Nebraska to raise our family, knowing that there are great schools, great neighbors, great opportunities here too. My parents were public school teachers. I've always really valued education, in part because of my parents and watching them, go off to work really early in the morning, come home pretty tired. They'd still help me with my schoolwork, and I'd watch them. My dad taught biology and coached basketball. My mom taught English and journalism and yearbook. We'd have science experiments. We had little chickens in an incubator in my house over the holiday breaks. I could see all that they did to help their students learn and thrive, and their work was more than work. It was purposeful support for our community and our future. And so I think without realizing it, having parents who are public school teachers made me want to have a career that also had some meaning beyond a paycheck, that I could come home and feel like I'd made a difference for my community. And in my early stages of my career, I did do management consulting, in part for the paycheck, because I had student loans to pay down after college, but then moved from there to working in the nonprofit sector in an organization called LEAP, which stood for Leadership, Education, Athletics, and Partnership, and helping kids from really low-income communities, neighborhoods, get on a path to college from a young age. Worked in City Hall in the Bay Area for a time, and then went back to youth development work, working for Boys and Girls Club, as was mentioned by Andy. And when I came to Lincoln, I just started getting involved in the community, and the rest is sort of history. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but a childhood that was wonderful and led me to this place.
How did your upbringing shape your values and leadership style? If you could give some insight on that.
Well, I will say that Oregon is the first state that ever had a 5-cent deposit on bottles and cans. You could, and this is, you could return, your recyclables and get cash back. And I used to do that with my dad. We would load up all our bottles and cans and go get the change, and he'd let me buy a Nestle Crunch bar. And I thought that was pretty cool. It was like for free. And I think he was also someone who gardened. We had fresh produce in our backyard growing up. And when I first moved here, one of my earliest memories, actually, of Lincoln was going to a neighbor's party, getting to know my neighbors, and watching people throw aluminum cans in the trash. And I was shocked. I was like, what? Wait, how could that be? And yeah, there's no bottle bill, but you can recycle aluminum here. And I was just so surprised, and over time, as I got more involved in volunteering for the Children's Museum or the Nature Center, I eventually got asked to be a part of the Planning Commission, and I looked at it as a way of offering my perspective, my experience, my values to the collective visioning for Lincoln. And so care about the environment is a big part of my administration now as mayor, and we have Nebraska's first climate action plan. In part, I think it goes back to those Nestle Crunch bars when I was in elementary school.
Before I became mayor, I always said I'm not quite sure what the Lord is actually, what path the Lord is guiding me down. And when I became mayor, I thought, okay, this is what the preparation has been, because I truly believed our lived experience is what provides us, and what you said, Andy. I think it provides us with a foundation that allows us to do what we do. And similar to what Mayor Gaylor Baird just mentioned, that 5-cent deposit on cans, really drives some of the values that we bring to our leadership roles as mayors. And I will say that I've been known to carry empty plastic bottles back from various cities across the country because there was no adequate recycling in some of the cities and states that I've traveled to. So that's that value proposition that we talk about in the sense of what drives us. And so my lived experience, grew up in Kansas City, Kansas. Sadly enough, it's usually in one of the top 10 most violent cities in America. I grew up in the heart of that environment, of that violence, and those types of experiences have shaped me as an individual. People ask me all the time, how did you get out of the cycle, the poverty cycle? And I tell them all the time, it's relatively easy. I say always two things. It's my faith and education. And my faith gave me a foundation of the community that would surround me with what I needed to be successful. Secondarily, it was education. And part of that education was what I got here at Union College. Let's give Union College a big round of applause. Students, faculty, leadership, that's what gave us that foundation. As a matter of fact, Union creates leaders. And we always, that's something I used to say when I was here at school. And, we got Dr. Wheeling here. We got Shane Devenby up there. We've got Dan Carlson, a lot of folks that I went to school with back then. Nicole Tavares down here. So a lot of folks I went to school with back then that are now leading in the areas that they're leading in. And one of the I tell this story all the time to my union colleagues. One time I was in a car in Gresham, and there were 5 of us in the car. And I was joking, and I said, Union creates leaders. I said it out loud. And I started laughing. Well, none of the other 4 people in the car were laughing. And it quickly hit me why not. It's because I was the boss of the other 4, and they were all from Walla Walla. Yes. Union creates leaders. So really, our lived experience and my environment that I grew up in absolutely shapes what I get to do as a leader, what I get to do as a mayor today. I'll give one quick example to that. When I became mayor, we had a tremendous problem with youth violence in and around the city of Gresham. In 2022, we lost 15 lives to violence, to gun violence, and many of those were youth. Many of the crimes that happened with violence in the Multnomah County, I know Multnomah is a tough thing to say, Multnomah County, where I live, happened and were perpetrated for youth between the ages of 15 and 22. 15 and 22, so they're either the perpetrator or the victim. Today, last year, we saw that number drop all the way to 5. 5 total, and none of those were youth. Let's give that a big round of applause. Now, most people will tell you that you only impact that through law enforcement. But because of my lived experience, because of what my experience was as a youth in the city of Kansas City, Kansas, I knew that wasn't the path to solving the challenge. So what do? Youth engagement, because that's what saved me. Things like the Boys and Girls Club, the things like late night basketball. Those types of things were the things that engaged me. It was youth choir at my church. Those types of things engaged me at the times and points in my life that were pivotal. And if we don't have that youth engagement, if we don't have engagement, then we don't move our youth along the path that they need to go along. And so right when I became mayor, worked with my city council, worked with our staff to develop a program that we call a MOPI. It's East Multnomah Outreach, Prevention, and Intervention. So I know that's a lot, but it's a program that impacts youth through engagement. And that was one of the critical things that allowed us to drop those violent incidences within our youth. And that absolutely comes from my own experience as a youth. So you asked us, what are the things that, as younger folks in ourselves, were things that impact us today? That absolutely has been something that has benefited our community and has significantly reduced the youth that we've lost to violent crime.
Great. Oh, that's amazing. Given your guys' reputation, how much work you guys have put in to get to where you guys are now, were there any mentors or any key supporters who had helped you along the way? And if so, what was that experience? How did that impact you? Were there more ways that you didn't even think of that, wow, that guy was right, or that girl was right, or this certain group is right? Was there any mentors that played a factor in that?
Absolutely not. I did it all myself. Of course. Great question, Andy. First and foremost, my parents. My parents were absolutely the ones who shaped and molded me as an individual and the person I am today. If I do anything bad, it's my own fault. If I do anything great, it's because of them. So I want to give them certainly the respect and accolades that they need and deserve, because they are amazing. Amazing people. I can think of other folks that have been influential. There's a youth director, here in Kansas Nebraska Conference, used to be here. His name is Charlie Thompson. Anybody know Charlie? Yeah, Charlie. He was one of the greatest leaders I've ever gotten a chance to work for. And I don't think he knew how good he was, but phenomenal leader and mentor. He actually appointed me the assistant camp director at the ripe old age of 20 at Broken Arrow. Anybody go to Broken Arrow? One or two people? One or two folks? Yeah. I was there for like 20 years. I'm kidding. It was only 6. It felt like 20 though. Charlie made me the assistant camp director after 2 years of being a counselor. Why was that so impactful? Because he saw in me what I didn't see in myself. And there's a book called Strengths Finders 2.0, and they say in that book, allowing youth to flex what you think is their core competency allows them, especially in their teenage years, allows them to further develop that. And so I got a chance to further develop this. Now, what was very unique about being appointed to this position at the ripe old age of 20 was there was a staff of about 37 people. I was the only minority on the entire staff. And this was in 1993. It wasn't the environment wasn't what it is today in central Kansas. And actually, one of the folks on the staff was Dr. Merlin Willing here. So I'd like to take a little bit of credit for where he is today. I'm sure I gave you some incredible advice and wisdom at that point in time. And so ultimately, it was so impactful for me to have that experience where someone from dominant culture gave me a chance at a time and place where it was not something. I mean, it wasn't the incredible, focus that you see here. I mean, this is, I love this, I got to say. The diversity that we now have here at the university that I went to. So back then it wasn't quite that environment. And so having a chance to get into that role was incredibly empowering, impactful, and absolutely part of the reason why I am where I am today. And there were many other leaders that have helped me along the way, has gotten me to where I am, and I just appreciate them taking the opportunity to be a mentor and actually, speaking really good into me along the way.
I would agree that my parents had a big influence on me, as I mentioned before, just in thinking about what I want to do with my life, how I want to approach my life, and their willingness to sacrifice. As teachers, at public school, high school teachers, we didn't have a lot of perks or frills or anything like that. Our vacations were camping in Eastern Oregon, in the Wallowa Mountains.
Ooh, the Wallowas.
Mm-hmm. And we had a car that, like, one of the doors was a different color than the rest of the doors on the car. Everything was used. Yeah, we drove a Volkswagen van for a while. Anyway, but when it came time to assess higher education opportunities, they were like, "We'll try to support you wherever you want to go, even if that means they had to pay a little more, or I had to take out more loans." They were willing to do that. And not all my friends' parents, many of them who had more means, were willing to do that for their children. And then when I got to Yale, I met women who were doing all kinds of things, professors, people who came to campus. Your exposure to people from different parts of the world when you go to a university is phenomenal. So many things are happening in such a compressed space. And growing up in the 70s, most of the women I knew were like my mom, either a teacher or a nurse or counselor or did childcare. I really hadn't met women in the business sector, there was a county commissioner, Gladys McCoy, who I had met, but she was rare. It was rare to see a woman in elected leadership. But at Yale, I met people, who were working in high leadership at the UN, or were tenured professors, or partners in management consulting firms. And so it just opened my eyes to sort of what's possible. And then more specifically, after moving to Lincoln, the gentleman who preceded me as mayor, Chris Beitler, was someone who I got to know as I was on planning commission and city council, and would interact with him quite frequently. And I think a lot of the mentoring I got was just by observing. I mean, I really encourage you to just watch carefully how people you admire operate. You can learn so much without them actively explaining things to you. And what I noticed about Mayor Beitler was that he was very calm and quiet. He listened to people in meetings. He would ask good questions. And when in politics, as is so often the case, not everyone is diplomatic or kind or generous, he took the high road again and again. And he was thinking about the long term. He was thinking about, how do I, rather than getting into petty fights, how do I continue to find common ground and try to achieve my vision and support the community and what is in the best interest of their community. So like the ego was in check. And so then I did, of course, go to him and ask questions and more deliberately seek mentoring, but a lot of it was through observation and interaction. And that has, sometimes I find myself, I'll just kind of, if I'm getting a little hot under the collar about something happening, I'll think about him and like picture sort of his demeanor, and it is still something that serves me and our community well, I think.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced when stepping into a leadership role post-college or university?
Well, I became mayor 9 months before the pandemic broke out. And in campaigning for mayor, I was talking about quality of life and public safety and infrastructure and neighborhoods and this park I wanted to build downtown. And so to all of a sudden have to make such a significant pivot and to get really familiar with our pandemic playbook, essentially, something that public health team had trained for. They've trained all their lives hoping you never face an epidemic of such proportions. But I remember going home and flipping through this 3-ring notebook of all the work that they had done, just the year before, updating it, about how you communicate an emergency. Mm-hmm. What incident command looks like for a public health emergency. I had thought about natural disasters, of course, because while I was running for mayor, we actually had severe floods that took out power to our well fields in Ashland. And I remember thinking during the long weekend of that incident, that's a really prolonged emergency, because it was like 3 days. Yeah. So I think learning how to support a community in collaboration with the community, because you lead through an emergency in collaboration with the community, understanding how to offer the facts and hope during a protracted emergency, to try to ensure people had information that they could act on and understood when you'd be coming back to them again. All of that was maybe not something I had envisioned that I would be doing 9 months in as mayor. Yeah. And it really accelerated my development as a leader And it certainly fostered my appreciation for what I knew to be true, but really experienced in such an intense way. Is just that people who suit up and work in the local government, who don't get credit very often for serving you, they're heroes. I mean, walking to those vaccine clinics at the Pinnacle Bank Arena and seeing our public health nurses filling syringes hour after hour, I just, it was a marathon. Every day was a marathon for so many people in our community. And at those vaccine clinics, it was nurses, it was our IT professionals who were coming up with ways to register people quickly. It was our aging services loaning their vans to help folks with physical disabilities get there. It was a whole of government effort, and these folks are very often not that visible. But I'm so proud to serve alongside so many committed public servants. And it kept me going. It helped me have an even greater sense of purpose in my role as their leader. But what was truly a collective leadership effort.
Oddly, one of the most challenging leadership experiences I had after college, university, was when I got the opportunity to be the chair of the Gresham Area Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. Because many times when you're in a position of leadership, you get the de facto respect that many times your position deserves and requires. And as mayors, many times, folks instantly hear the mayor title and, it's, hey, Mr. Mayor, hey, Madam Mayor, you get that respect. And many times you can lose that respect if you don't effectively, lead with, I think, responsibility and values and morals, those types of things. But many times you get that. When I became the chair of the Gresham Area Chamber of Commerce, oddly enough, when you're working with a board of volunteers, they don't just instantly do what you ask them to do. And I was, get this, I was actually the youngest and first minority president of the Gresham Area Commerce Board of Directors. Now I'm going to tell the story. It's a little risque, but bear with me here.
Attention.
I know. You'll know what I'm talking about here in a minute. I go to a meeting, one of my very first meetings, representing the Gresham Area Chamber of Commerce. I walk in, and this woman walks up to me, and she introduces herself. I introduce myself, and I said, "Hey, I'm Travis Stovall." And she looks at me, and she goes, "But you're black." Told you it's going to be risky. And I was like, I know, don't tell anybody, maybe Noelle notice. She goes, "But you're black." Now, we both had a laugh. She was actually Asian, as a matter of fact, and she was the one who set up the meeting. And what she was saying was she could not believe the Gresham Area Chamber of Commerce had a person of color as their president of the Chamber of Commerce. That's what she was saying. I knew what she was saying. I know what she was hinting at. Because back then, Gresham wasn't very diverse. And so that was the environment that I stepped into in my great 32 years of wisdom and experience. And so as you move into nonprofit type of board leadership, again, people don't just do what you want them to do just because you ask them. They're all there voluntarily, and you've got to utilize a different skill set of leadership. Again, as a mayor, if you're a CEO, if you're a vice president, many of those titles instantly get you, some level of respect. But when you're leading a group of volunteers, it's a whole different ballgame. You've got to build consensus. You've got to make sure that you're listening, which I don't do very well. You've got to make sure that you're looking to move forward what this group wants to move forward with. You've got to inspire them in the deepest sense to be able to do the things that you need them to do to be able to create an organization that is successful. And in that year, I'm not bragging, okay, maybe a little. That's like when I travel, I do probably 50, 60 talks a year, and I always say, I kid you not, I always brag, I'm like, yeah, I graduated top of my class at Union College. Yeah, I didn't go to Yale. Let's give that a big round of applause. I mean, come on. I mean, just getting there is something that's an accomplishment, and doing what she has done is phenomenal. But I always brag because actually, none of you have done this, but if you go up there and look at the plaque on the wall, the graduate of the year in 1999, is yours truly.
Hey,
So
all
I get to
right.
brag
There you
about
go.
that as I go
There you
across the
go.
region. And everybody's like, where's Union? Schenectady, New York, actually. Because there's that Union College there. And people get that mixed up all the time. But the year that I got to be the president of the Chamber of Commerce, we actually had the most profitable year we've had in its history, even to today. We went from about 400 members up to almost 800. So a tremendous year, tremendously successful year. And that was probably, Andy, one of my most challenging leadership, adventures that I've ever had, even to this day. Even as mayor, I think that was harder than this.
Great. All right. This question is not on my list, but I want to know, what was it like running for office for the first time as mayor? Like, what were you guys feeling during that campaign? And I guess a follow-up question, what were some of the lessons you learned during that campaign?
Wow. So I'm going to lead with this right here. I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm going to give it to you straight away, as good journalists do. And I will tell you that when I ran for mayor, it was in 2020. So it was just post George Floyd's murder. It was right in the heart of the beginning of the pandemic. And that was the first time I've ever run for elected office. And there were 52,000 votes cast in my election, 52,000. And I won by a landslide. That's how good I was. Out of 52,000, I won by 13. Not 13,000, 13 votes total. 13 votes. Total of 13 votes. Out of 52,000 votes, I won by 13. So it wasn't a landslide. When I tell people, I was like, when you win by 13 out of 52,000, that's a tie, actually. And the person who got number 2, he was actually on the council and became the council president once I won the election. So talk about awkward. Go to council meetings, and that person thought they were the mayor because they were like, 13 votes, man. Really? Come on. I'm like even with you. Now, just getting back to the election, this is my first election, and oddly enough, I never wanted to be mayor. Never wanted to be mayor. Still don't. But, and people in my city know this, and I say, here's the deal. We need to have significant and substantial change as we move forward, and if I could do that without being mayor, I would, but I can't. So this is why I'm running for this role, is because I believe I need to be in this position to be able to make positive change. Now, I didn't do that from some late night inspiration, some late night epiphany. I woke up and I'm like, I'm going to be mayor. No, the previous mayor, who was mayor for 14 years, he stepped down partway through the pandemic. And in his resignation letter to the community, he said, unbeknownst to me, I think Travis Stovall should be mayor. I was like, who? I literally had no idea. I'm in a meeting, and my phone starts blowing up. I'm like, what is going on? And the first thing I see is Mayor Bemis just stepped down and said, you should be mayor. And I had no intention of doing such. For the first 60 days after that, people said, hey, you're running? I was like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not running. And finally, during the pandemic, people, folks would ask me, say, hey, you know what? We need to have positive change in our country. What should we do? I said, there's three things that we need to do. First, we need to educate ourselves to the systemic nature of discrimination within our country. Number 2, use your powerful majority voice to give me and folks who look like me a platform so that we can tell our story. Because that's all I can do, is I can tell you my lived experience. And I said, number 3, the last one is to ensure that if you see anything that represents discrimination, discriminatory behavior, anything, step in and defend what's right. It took me 2 months. Of course, I was in a funk because of what happened to George Floyd. It took me 2 months to realize the previous mayor, dominant culture, different political ideology, had done a number 2. He used this powerful majority platform to give me a voice. And that's when I did wake up that morning with an epiphany. I said, oh my goodness, he did number 2. I said, at least I have to run. If I lose, I still ran. Come on now. And so at that point, I ran. One of the hardest things about running, and Mayor Gaylord Barrett may not feel this way, but one of the things that's just a drudgery is fundraising. I mean, you have to do what's called call time. You're calling, anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day trying to raise money. And that's sometimes the hard part. But I mean, I absolutely enjoy talking to people. I actually enjoy talking about the vision. I enjoyed, being able to connect. And one thing that people would always ask me, what's your vision? What are you going to do to the city? And I said, hey, actually, my vision is to ensure that we've got a community that is very good at collectively bringing your thoughts and ideas to the forefront, so that we as a mayor and council can take those ideas, sift through them, put together the right package to bring to our community to make it a better place.
I hope if you take away just one thing from this talk, it's that your vote can really make a difference. You could have put your thumb on the scale and tipped it away from Mayor Stovall, or you made his victory even more resounding. It really is incredible how close elections can be and how few people turn out to vote. I've been working through every election that I've ever been in to turn out the votes. And I think my very first race, maybe 23% of the electorate came out in the city elections that maybe not that many people, as many people pay attention to as compared to a presidential. But we've been working and working and working, and it was closer to somewhere in the 40% range the last time I ran. Still less than half of registered voters, but again, trying to get the word out, trying to make sure people are aware of the issues and that their votes actually matter. And in fact, we have a city election on Tuesday, April 8th. If you haven't already voted and you are a Lincoln voter, I encourage you to participate in this election. There are important decisions being made. People running for school board, people who will shape our children's future. There are people running for city council who help shape the city's future. And there's a ballot initiative about infrastructure investment in our streets that helps support safety on the roads, emergency response times of vehicles on those roads, and support for commerce and quality of life. So April 8th, Tuesday, polls are open from 8 to 8. You can also go to the election commissioner and vote in person if you're registered. So my first election wasn't for mayor, but you did ask about mayoral election, and I was on city council at the time. And what actually happened was that the previous mayor, my mentor, was running for his 4th term, and a historic 4th term as mayor. And because his opponents had not been able to beat him at the ballot box, they put together a term limits initiative. A term limits initiative that would say a Lincoln mayor can only be mayor 3 terms, even though he'd already announced and was running. And it would go into effect immediately, meaning that when it passed at the ballot box, as it did, he had to immediately suspend his campaign. And so in the months leading up to that election, he and I talked about it. And he was like, it has to be you. I mean, it is an incredible feature of a good leader, I think, to try to cultivate the next leader, someone to entrust the work they've done to continue good work, and to bring along the next generation. That's a real sign of a good leader, I think. And so we had those conversations, and I was sort of mentally getting ready for it, not really doing anything in particular other than maybe, I didn't even take a picture or a headshot till after the election. But the election was on November 6th of 2018, and I remember that date well because it's my wedding anniversary. My husband and I were out to dinner celebrating our anniversary downtown, and we're not going to check our phones until after dessert or maybe before dessert. We're just going to eat and try to enjoy this moment before we know how our lives may or may not change. And it was a pretty resounding victory for the term limits, and so by dessert we knew that I was going to announce that week that I was running for mayor. And I just kind of gulped my dessert down. And then, that campaign was very accelerated because I only had like a few months before the election to put together a campaign. But it's very helpful to have a talented campaign professional, someone with experience who can target. When you have so few people who vote, you want to zero in on the people who are most likely to go to the ballot. And there is voter data that helps you determine that. And I hate to break it to you, but your age group is among the least likely to vote. So we didn't spend as much time targeting young people as we did older folks who participate or did used to participate in much higher percentages. We did see a shift actually in my last race, my re-election. We saw almost 50-50 of people over age 50, and that was a really great a great development to see, but one we worked hard for, one people have worked hard for. And it helps to bring together, you've got to have a fundraising target, and you've got to raise the money, because the only way you get people to vote is to make sure they know there's an election, and you do that through mail and commercials and radio and all the things like you want to block on your phone when you get all those ads and texts. But it raises awareness, and you raise those resources to raise awareness and get people to turn out. And volunteers make a real difference. If you ever want a really interesting experience, and you know, campaign volunteers can have a lot of responsibility and get a lot of insight into how things work. And we do rely both on volunteers as well as paid staff to run a campaign. And I think the main thing I would say, though, about running a successful campaign that I was surprised about, having run a few times, was that in the beginning I was like, I gotta run, I'm qualified, I'm gonna run on my credentials. Guess what? No one cares. No one cares. They want to feel like they can identify with you, they want to know your values, and they want to know that you care about the same things they care about. And it was interesting, as a woman in particular, I thought it was important to show that I had credentials, because I felt like there might be a expectation that I didn't have them as a female. But what people appreciated knowing was that I was a mom and had 3 kids, and I cared about parks, trails, pools, and libraries, quality of life issues. And I felt, to be honest, a little bit put in a box that way, a little bit of a stereotype. But all those things are true, and it did help me connect with people across the aisle who also cared about those things. And in Lincoln, one of the big things that we have as a point of pride are our parks and trails. It's one of our competitive advantages, if you will, since we don't have the Puget Sound or the mountain, the Olympic Peninsula, Mount Hood, all those things. Okay, stop.
All we have is grass. It's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, I sort of reluctantly embraced those aspects of my identity to shape my campaign, because they resonated and they were true, and they do matter to my agenda and what I pursue. But I also particularly reached out to women when I was campaigning. I called Republican women. They were one of my groups that I chose to zero in on to try to persuade to vote for me, because we could connect on these issues, and it helped me secure that first election victory back in 2013 when I ran for council.
Awesome.
Andy, there's one other election story I'm going to tell really quick, and this crowd will appreciate it. I got COVID during the election, so I was down for almost 3 weeks. I got bad COVID, as I call it, because it was before the vaccines were out. None of that was available, and I was absolutely down. Couldn't do anything for 3 weeks, right in the middle of the election. And so after the election hit, I wasn't as lucky as you, because it took a month before my election was actually certified, because they had to do recounts because it was so close, all that good stuff. Well, right after the election, and in Oregon it's 100% mail-in voting, so you heard me say 52,000. That's roughly about 60 to 70% of our entire electorate. Actually, maybe even that's closer to 80% actually, because of the opportunity for mail-in voting. Now, just after the election, there's this thing called, you can cure the ballots. I won't go into the details of what that means, but it's all legit. You can cure the ballots. But my team called me up and says, Mayor, you got to raise another $5,000. And I'm like, oh gosh, you got to be kidding me. I am sick as could be. I don't want to raise another dime. And at this point, I had about a 750 vote gap. This is right after the election. And so for the next 5 days, every single day, I lost ground. It went from 750 down to like 600, down to like 500. I'm thinking, how does that even happen statistically? I did take, I can't even say it, statistics here at Union College, so I could do the calculations in my head. And I was like, this just can't happen. And so on day number 6, I was like, Lord, I need a Gideon moment here. If I'm supposed to be mayor, I need a clear sign that this is what the gig needs to be. I said, so tomorrow, I need to see a 7-vote gain. Not a 6 vote, not an 8 vote, 7 votes specifically against my opponent. I have the chart, folks. The very next day, 7 exact votes. And from that point to the end of the recount perspective, it went down every single day. Again, statistically, don't know how that happens. But as soon as I saw that 7 votes specifically on that day, somebody called me that day, how do you feel about the race? I'm like, I got this. They're like, how do you know so confidently? I got it, just trust me. Now, so that was, I had to run for the 2 years at the end of that previous mayor's term. And then I had to run 2 years in. And so I'm like, Lord, come on now. I need something definitive. And Nicole and I were in London at the time. And the day that anybody could file against you, we were in London. And one of the folks at City Hall, our recorder, sent me a text and said, no one filed against you. I'm like, that's pretty clear. You got me. So yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there, but kind of a super cool confidence that somebody else is looking over what we're trying to do here.
Well, I want to ask one more question, and then I want to give some time for the audience to ask any questions. But to, I guess, sum this portion up, in any leadership role, whatever that looks like, everyone is bound to make mistakes, or at least the person in charge is bound to make mistakes. What was something that you guys had learned from a mistake that you had made in your time?
So I know straight away my answer for this. Right when I became mayor, there was some transition at a key position within the city of Gresham, and I was at a council meeting, and every single counselor on the council at the time praised the interim individual that was in the role, praised the interim individual. And so, but then this individual backed out of the opportunity. And I thought, the council loves this individual, so I'm going to go work this individual and get them back in, and then potentially get them to, really focus on this role permanently. So I did all the work over a weekend. I made calls. I talked to everybody. I was like, this person needs to be, working for us. And I'm talking to the individual, trying to convince them to throw their hat back in the ring. I go through all of that work. And I say, okay, I'm going to now present to the council that this person is back in. And so I did that in what we call an executive session, because it was personnel related. And at that point in time, the support wasn't quite there that I thought. And so I had to go back to the individual and say, as a matter of fact, we're not going to be moving forward with that. It wasn't a decision, but, and the person was a little bit frustrated, and so was I. And the challenge that presented is the fact that, we're moving forward. We've got this all identified, but yet I hadn't done the right work to be able to fully understand and appreciate that what somebody sometimes says in a public meeting may or may not be exactly how they personally feel. And individually feel. And so that was right when I became mayor, and that was an absolute learning experience and a pretty significant mistake, that I made, underestimating or overestimating the support that was there to be able to move forward with a key decision for our city.
I think personnel is a good place to answer this question, because we do so much in collaboration with our leadership teams. Our cabinets, you've got the fire chief, police chief, the director of aging services, the director of parks and trails, the director of libraries, the director of building and safety, the planning director, your economic development lead, your city attorney. They're public works. It's such a diverse set of services that we have to provide, and you need people with expertise in many different realms. And it certainly isn't expected that the mayor has the expertise in all of those realms. You're like the chief elected officer. You're the vision, you're working an agenda, and you're responsible for delivering these services. So who you hire really does matter, because they are going to have to make a lot of leadership decisions, as a proxy for you. And you can do your best. You can do searches. You can look at references. You can do interviews, and you can think you have the right person, and and in some cases, there have been times in my experience as mayor over the course of the 6 years where in fact it didn't end up being a good fit for one reason or another, or someone decided to leave. And those are hard moments because, you want to make sure you've got the right people and the right fit in order to deliver. And there's a lot at stake, and regrouping and making sure that you learn from those experiences and that they inform how you do your search in the future makes a difference. I would say that, for example, when I was looking to hire a health director and had an interim in place, someone with a ton of experience, we did a national search, and the search didn't really yield me the right fit. So I felt good about that decision. But when the pandemic hit, and it turns out we hadn't hired the candidate from Seattle or from across the country, I learned how valuable it was to have someone with local relationships, because that person knew how to call up the people at the hospitals, knew the people at University of Nebraska Medical Center, knew the experts, knew the different communities, and was able to pull together stakeholders like someone from the outside could not have done. And I love to try to hire the most talented person. I like bringing people here if I can, but in truth, a lot of leadership is about relationships, and so those local leaders can really be effective. And I didn't realize that coming in necessarily. That wasn't necessarily my frame of mind, but it's something that I've learned and take into account when I'm making personnel decisions.
Thank you guys for your responses. We really appreciate that. Now we're going to open the board to any audience members who might have any questions at this time. Ellie.
What is the biggest skill that you had to grow or learn once you became president? That was like TER or strategic planning or the way you answer questions. Was something that specifically grew once?
Thank you for that question. I would say that I had never been the CEO of a large organization, which is sort of how I think about being the mayor in Lincoln. There's like over 2,000 city employees. I'd been a director of a nonprofit. I had worked in large organizations, but I'd never been the key decision maker, like when all the conflicts come to a head, like you have to make that tough call. And so when I won the election, one of my first moves was to look at the private sector for models of strategic planning and strategic structural organizational approaches. And I talked with people, and I read some books and learned about a particular model that I use, and it gave me a framework for our strategic plan, and it helped guide my decision to take a short but meaningful retreat with my key staff to articulate the vision statement for our administration, the core values of our administration, which you can look up online. They're kind of fun, and then create a 4-year plan of like what are the rocks, what are the main things we want to get done, knowing that lots of things will happen that we don't expect. I mean, we weren't thinking about a pandemic at the time, but what do we think we can get done in 4 years? What are the heavy lifts? And one of them for me was like launching a climate action plan and making moves towards resilience and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, along with some other key strategies. But that was a big one because it hadn't been done before. And then upon re-election, resetting, another set of 4-year goals and quarterly rocks that help you measure your progress towards those goals. And that just wasn't something that I'd done on such a scale or using that format before, but it's been helpful in trying to give form and functionality to what can be a very chaotic set of work. Literally there are, fire drills. Like literally there are lights and sirens on a daily basis. So having your values at the core of what you're doing, helping guide your decision making and your plan, that you're working a plan, it provides a steadiness to the work that is otherwise can be very fragmented.
I would say time and energy management, and mostly energy management. People ask me all the time, what was the most surprising thing you experienced when you became mayor? And it really is the volume of things we deal with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, when you're leading a, kind of a single purpose company, let's say that you're a consulting firm that does management consulting. Well, you do management consulting. But as mayors, in the morning, we'll talk about, water rates. By noon, we've already dealt with things like public safety and fire and police, and then we've got to jump over to streets and parks and
Potholes.
Yeah, potholes.
Potholes.
I mean,
Yes,
Lincoln has
yes.
no potholes, so let's give that a big round of applause. And so, I mean, you've got all these things that are coming at you all the time. So the volume of stuff we deal with on a day-to-day basis is tremendous, and you've got to do a much better job of almost any position I have ever been in to be able to manage the time and energy, so that I can be able to be effective. And my role is a little bit different than what you have here in Lincoln. Lincoln, you have a strong mayor, and in Gresham, we have a weak mayor. I mean, I'm a strong mayor, but I'm strong. But our position is weak in the sense that it's a mayor and council form of management. So we do have a city manager that runs all of our day-to-day operations. So I'm more like the chairperson of the board, rather than really the CEO and the chairperson, which is your leadership type of structure here in the Lincoln type of structure. And so that has a different skill set required, but something I've been introduced to before. But really, it's about just time management, because I still run my own personal company, that I'm the founder of. So I've got to be able to do all of that, within the time frame and compacted time frame that we have available to us. All of us only have 24 hours in a day. Well, I have 25, but there's only 24 hours in a day, and so I have to pack in everything that we need to, and you just got to be much more efficient with your time and attention.
We're awake for a lot of those 24 hours.
Yeah, that we are.
So you had a question?
Yeah, so I have a question for Mayor Gello. So you talked about some environmental initiatives here in Lincoln. So how do you ensure these policies are designed with the unique needs of underrepresented communities in mind, and what systems are put in place in the planning process?
Thank you for that question. One of the key ways we operate in all realms, and especially with our environmental initiatives, is through robust community engagement. So when we're setting about to implement the Climate Action Plan, and even in its design, but for implementation's purposes, we had a Resilient Lincoln community stakeholder committee, and we tried to invite people from many different sectors of the community, and that's professional sectors, it's geographic, it's income, it's area of expertise, and we wanted to make sure we were trying to look at environmental progress through many different lenses, and that those voices were shaping our priorities. And then as we've moved forward, again, there are over 100 strategies in our Climate Action Plan, and we worked with our Resilient Lincoln Roundtable, which anyone can come to or Zoom into or be a part of, to hear from the public about what they care about. And this has led to the formation of a community food committee that's working on food security and resilience. And we've just announced a policy proposal I'm really excited about, which is, it's going through the channels now. It's not yet approved, but we've proposed changes to municipal code that would allow people to garden, to sell the produce from their gardens on their home property, and that could even be a home occupation, such that you can sell from your yard certain days of the year in a kind of limited neighborhood-friendly way that fosters connections with community, but that also provides a little bit of microeconomic opportunity as well as, again, food security. So that's one aspect, very community-driven. That was not my vision. That was from the ground up, literally and figuratively. And we also chose to focus on where there were maybe the most threats, and in certain instances, along with flooding, which we did some a very heavy political lift to try to protect certain neighborhoods where they're in the floodplains and the substandard housing to protect from flood damage. We also are looking at heat response. We have we're going to be announcing soon a heat response strategy to try to come up with ways for folks to have a place to go if, in the event of a severe heat experience, folks who may not have well-insulated housing, or the elderly who may be especially vulnerable, that we're putting in place emergency protocols to try to support health and well-being and safety in the event of extreme weather. And we're going to turn to extreme cold after that. But in many ways, we are thinking about health and safety no matter what we do, for all.
Vinny.
Being a mayor sounds fun. Outside of mayoring, what is your favorite hobby?
I don't have any hobbies because I do this so much, and I have 3 kids, like I said. But I am pretty obsessed with just on a micro. I actually, you know what? I took guitar lessons at Union College before I was mayor, and that was my hobby for a while. And then
All right.
when I had to drop everything and run for mayor, I gave up my guitar lessons. But Daniel Martinez was my teacher, and I love him.
My teacher. Wow.
He's my husband's teacher now, so I don't. My husband gets to have that hobby. But I'm obsessed with Sudoku and Connections and Wordle and all those New York Times puzzle games. I've thought about taking that app off my phone because I love doing it so much. Yeah.
I wouldn't do that. I mean, I do Wordle and Connections every day. I haven't got my Connections today, so don't give me any hints, people. I did get my Wordle, by the way, though. Yeah, I won't say what it is because you may not have done it yet. So I actually, I'm a pilot. I'm a private pilot, so I love aviation.
Oh my goodness.
As a matter of fact, Silverhawk Aviation. I don't know if anybody went to the presentation this morning. That's actually where I finished up my pilot's license out at Silverhawk here at Lincoln Airport back when I was here at Union. So I love aviation, love flying airplanes.
Very cool. I'm glad I went first.
I saw that. I saw you, Matthew, went first.
So this is specifically for Mayor Stovall, but how do you see your faith integrating with public service and all of that? Like, have there been challenges along the way? How do you see that interacting as you've been kind of more now in this public role?
So, ultimately, many times as mayor, you do get to actually have the opportunity to limit, certain exposure to certain things, like the thing like Sabbath. I get to say, no, I'm not going to attend that or not going to do that. That's my Sabbath, those types of things. But the thing is that I always tell people, I always say that I don't lead from the position of my religion. So I'm not going to cause prohibition in the city of Gresham, although I have warned them that I would if they didn't stop. But I'm not going to lead the city through the position of my religion. My religion is always going to influence me, though. It's going to influence my morals, my values, those perspectives. When I think about the work that we do, the Bible says, that what we do for the least of these, is how we measure who we are. And so when I think about that, the work I do for our homeless population, our houseless and unsheltered, the work that we do for our individuals, who are struggling with mental health, the folks who are food insecure. Those are all the areas that drive a big component of who I am. And I know for your mayor here in Lincoln is also there in the sense of really caring for those individuals who are experiencing some of the biggest challenges they're having in their lives. So again, that doesn't specifically come from a place in the space of my religion, my spirituality, in the sense that just doing good is something that drives who I am. But that's really, I think, a solid foundation for who I am and how it actually highly influences who I am as an individual. But I can't lead the city from that perspective. So there are some things, and some days you're going to look at a decision and you're like, well, if I were looking at it from this, I would make this decision. But looking at it for the betterment of our community, this is the decision that needs to be made. So there are going to be some of those challenges that you look at through leadership. But you go through it. You work with the community. You work with your council, and you make the right decision as you go forward.
All right, we got time for one more. Yes. Oh, sorry.
I have one more question. But anyway, for Travis, it looks like you went at Union, of course, for business administration, right? And then you went on and got your master's after that. What are the skills that you learned that were able to kind of help you through your career?
So one of the I think the greatest skills that that I get to implement as a leader, especially in the public space, is the ability to build consensus, to be able to, many times you can't go directly at an issue. You have to be able to talk to a number of individuals that have what we call stakeholders, that have kind of stakeholdership in what that decision is going to be. And you have to build that support. One of the CEOs that I worked for back at Adventist Health used to always say to me, Travis, when you bring me something, bring it to me early and often. And I've utilized that skill set all the way through, meaning if I've got a big decision to make, I can't go to my council, I can't go to my city manager and throw it on them at the last minute. I've got to present it early enough in the game so that they can start, because we are all hardwired differently. Some, some they want all the information. Me, I don't. I make decisions based on gut. So I'm a big picture person. And so because of that, I need to appreciate everybody else's learning styles and their ability to comprehend something, and sometimes it takes longer. So early and often is the key. We've got to build that consensus, and you've got to be able to have the groundswell of support as you get ready to move forward with a key decision. And if you don't do that, you can absolutely leave many people behind you. And I'll end this response with this, one of my favorite sayings: a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. A person that convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. So the moment that you do not give them foundational understanding of what you're trying to communicate is the moment that, yeah, you may get them to do something today, but it's not been inspired, bless you, but it's not been inspired enough so that that will be something that they inculcate and bring into their inner being, so that then that guides them as they move forward.
All right. All right. Well, I thought
Sounds like
I
we
was
have
gonna
one.
say,
It sounds
you
like
wanna
we
have
have one more
right?
question. But we'll take
I
that
feel bad.
question.
You want to take it? Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I was gonna ask, you said, like during the current years, you said you've seen like a larger growth in like young people being involved in like the leadership position and even specifically like voting. And what do you think is like encouraging the younger people to be involved? Or like what is the specific thing the city has been doing?
I wish I knew the answer to that question because I would do more of it, but I do believe that the experiences we've had since 2020, whether it was schools being changed to hybrid or in some cases closed, whether it was George Floyd's murder, and even right now I'm seeing an awakening in some young people about federal workers being fired. There have been some incredible shocks to kind of our norms of existence. And I do think it's awakened students in some cases to think about what they care about, what they stand for. A lot of the protesters in Lincoln were young people who wanted to show that they cared about equality and civil rights and opportunity. And, those young people are getting to the age they're now, from 2020 to now, many of those who couldn't vote now can. And I suspect that their own experiences and awakening have really been accelerated by some of the significant experiences we've gone through together.
And I would second what was just shared, but then just further encourage you to step up and get engaged. We have a youth advisory council. These are generally high school students, and their engagement and involvement is just phenomenal. Just phenomenal. One of them, who's part of our our advisory council, he was a young African-American man, high school student, was homeless, while trying to orchestrate and coordinate his own personal high school education, was able to work through that. And just a couple weeks ago was able to travel with myself and a number of our city councilors back to D.C. and had an audience with a congresswoman, had an audience with other folks in the administration. Just was something that to me was just very, very impactful. And I think engagement, to answer your question, I think engagement at an early age is something that is encouraging youth now. And I think more mayors are becoming very astute to that. And we're starting to look at how do we make sure that youth now get engaged at an early age to the process, better understanding the process, so that they can actually contribute, to what's going on in our country. Regardless of what your political background ideology is, we want people to be engaged. Thoughtful and intelligent engagement is key. No matter where you come from and that political ideology, thoughtful and caring and intelligent engagement is key. And so I think some of the work that we're doing at the local city level is encouraging our youth to get more involved, but it's also incumbent upon us as mayors and leaders to be able to ensure that we've got mechanisms and avenues in place for our youth to be engaged. Because if they don't understand how their contribution makes a difference, you're not going to be interested in making that contribution. And so the more that we can connect your contribution with a positive outcome or a outcome is something I think will further get more engagement from our youth, high school, college, our young adults being more engaged in this discourse that's going to make us a better country.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your.
Let's give Andy a big round of applause. Excellent job.
It was very nerve-wracking, but this was really, really fun. Thank you guys so much for sharing your expertise
Thank
on
you.
leadership. And thank you guys. You guys have a busy schedule. You know, you guys got stuff to do. So we want to make sure you guys get out of here with,
Thank
all the
you.
time in the world. And please accept this gift. I was gonna get to that.
Thank you, everyone. Remember, April 8th,
Yeah.
there's an election.
Here we are.
Is this a Union College diploma? I've been waiting for this
Promise.
20 years. Nice.
Thank you.
All right, please get up one more time for Mayor
Thank you all
Gaylor
for
Barrett and
coming
Mayor
out.
Travis Stovall. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are dismissed. Thank you.